There's a 93% chance that you'll regret buying a home in 2024. Well, that's at least if 2023 is any indication. According to this survey by Clever Real Estate, in 2023, 93% of the people surveyed regretted buying a home, and it really came down to 6 major reasons. And if I'm being honest, all 6 of these reasons were absolutely preventable. They included everything from my home requires too much maintenance, to I bought too quickly, I spent too much, my interest rate was too high, I bought a fixer-upper, with the last one being I was pressured to make an offer. And while all of these things you absolutely want to avoid, there are a couple other things that I'm seeing right now in the 2024 housing market that I feel like are super important. And if you just brush them aside, there's a huge chance that you're going to have regrets if you buy a home in 2024. Now, before we go any further, I'd like to ask a huge favor. If you find any value in my videos at all, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up. And if you want to stay updated on everything real estate related, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. Now, out of the 6 regrets that I mentioned a moment ago in that article, only 2 of them really fall onto my list, and we're going to address both of them in today's video. But I want to start with a little story. The story is about a couple who called me from Beverly Hills. They currently live in Beverly Hills. He's an attorney and she's currently a professor at USC. And the reason they called me was to ask the age-old question, should we buy now or should we wait? So we went through her story, and I know many of you are going to think, well, Jeb, you just told her to buy, right? You're a real estate agent. And the answer is no. I actually gave her the opposite advice, and I want to tell you what we talked about. The very first question I asked her is, why do you want to buy? What are the reasons behind buying? And she came out and said that, well, her kids are a little bit older. They are in school in Beverly Hills. And because her friends own homes in Beverly Hills, she was kind of ashamed being a renter. Now, she didn't directly come out and say, I'm ashamed from being a renter, but that's what I gathered from that conversation. She didn't like the fact that she was renting and everyone else owned a home. And because she didn't own a home, she was missing out on equity gains. She was missing out on paying down the principal. She was missing out on all of those benefits that you have when it comes to being a homeowner. But then she went on to say that she was saving nearly $7,000 per month by renting her current home, and went on to say that their goal is actually to save somewhere around $100,000 per year. So I dug a little bit deeper and asked her, hey, what are you currently paying on your rent right now? And she mentioned at the time she was paying somewhere around $3,200 a month. I don't remember the number exactly, but I went on to tell her one of the biggest benefits of buying a home is that you're able to fix your housing costs. You don't have to worry about rent increases. You don't have to worry about the landlord coming in and jacking up your rent or asking you to move. And then she came back and said something really surprising to me. She said, hey, we're actually living in subsidized housing in Beverly Hills. And because of that, our rent is really, really low. And on top of that, they don't really change our rent year over year. Yeah, it goes up a little bit, but we're only talking about $100 here and there. In addition to that, we talked about where her kids were, age-wise, what they were planning to do once they graduate, all of that good stuff. And what we determined based on that conversation was that it made more sense to continue renting than it did to buy a home because of where she was in life, because she was able to put so much money away. She more or less had fixed rent, and on top of that, she didn't know if she was going to stay in Beverly Hills once her kids graduated, basically meaning that her needs were going to change after the kids went to school. So there was no real reason to go out and buy a home at the moment that was going to cost considerably more than she was renting, with needs that were going to change in the near future, which led me to tell her that renting was better than buying in that scenario. And the reason I started with that story is because that's the first regret that I want to talk about in today's video. It's feeling the pressure that you have to buy a home because friends, because family are doing it, because they've made so much in equity, because they're living in some grand home and you're renting and you feel like you're missing out. Well, that's not the right reason to buy a home. The right reason to buy a home is because it's the right time in your life. And most people aren't fortunate enough to be able to save $7,000, upwards of $100,000 per year after paying all their bills like the couple that I just mentioned. So before you start beating yourself up that you have to buy a home, that you have to go out and do it today, just look at where you are in your life. Do you have job security? Do you have relationship security? Where do you see yourself being in 5, 7, even 10 years? Because if I'm being honest, there's a high likelihood that you need to be in your home for about 7 to 10 years at this point because of how much homes have appreciated to really see the benefit in home ownership versus renting. Now, I realize that's counterintuitive to me being a real estate agent and actually helping people buy property, but I believe the most important thing you can do as a potential homeowner at the moment is have that longer term time horizon. But aside from that, there are 4 other things that I want to talk about in today's video. And the very first one is buying with the expectation that something is going to change in the future to make that home more affordable. I see a lot of people at the moment stretching their budget, having super high debt to income ratios, and talking about marrying the property and dating the rate with this idea that interest rates are going to fall, that they're going to go back down into the 3 or 4% range, or that the property is going to appreciate so much in the next year or 2 because that's what's happened over the last couple of years, that you're just going to be able to refinance and get that mortgage insurance removed. And that's going to in turn make things more affordable. Stop. Do not buy a home right now, or you'll regret it if the only reason you're buying that home is because you need something to change to make it more affordable. In fact, if that home isn't affordable, you shouldn't be buying that home to start. Now, I realize that payments are high, prices are high, that the payment sucks. It sucks when looking at that payment. But if you're looking at your budget wondering, how am I going to pay this every month? I need rates to come down. I need that mortgage insurance removed in order to make this make sense. Then you shouldn't be buying a home. But on the other hand, if you look at that payment and go, hey, it sucks, but I know we can do it. It's in our budget. It's everything we want in a property. It's the right time in our lives because we're a growing family. It's the school district we want, all of those things. Then that's actually the right reason to be buying a home. And that really takes me into the third regret that you'll have in buying a home in 2024. And that's if you're buying a home that doesn't fit your needs for the next 5 to 10 years. Yes, I realize inventory is very, very low in a lot of markets out there, and it's competitive. And you're going in and you're having to make a competitive offer, a lot of times above the asking price. Sometimes you're having to waive contingencies and do things that you never thought you would do in order to get your offer accepted. But please, do not buy a home that doesn't fit your needs just to buy a home. Yeah, there's not a lot to choose from. I get it. But that doesn't mean you should go out and sacrifice and just get something that kind of works just so you don't miss the boat. Understand, the boat will come back at some point. Now, will it come back at the same prices, with the same terms, all of that stuff? It's impossible to say. But even if it doesn't, you don't want to have regrets on buying that home that doesn't fit your needs. And what I mean by that is if you're looking for a 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom, that's a non-negotiable for you because of how many kids you have, or because you need to work from home and you need an office, or whatever the reason is. Don't sacrifice and buy a 2-bedroom that kind of works with the idea that, hey, in a couple of years, we'll just sell this and buy the next property. And on that same note, if you're relocating to another state, maybe you are leaving California. You hate California for a lot of the same reasons that other people hate California, and you're moving out of state. And you feel the need to buy a property in whatever town you're moving in, but you don't really know the town. Stop. Don't do that. Get accustomed to where you're moving. Rent for a little bit. Check out different areas just to make sure you're buying in an area that you want to live. Because that's exactly what happened over the pandemic, leading a majority of homeowners out there to have regrets about buying a home. They moved to a market that they were unfamiliar with because they could work from home, and they bought a home. And not only did they do that, they did some of the other things that we're going to talk about here in just a minute. And because of that, they have huge regrets. So if you're planning on moving out of state, just make sure you're doing your homework before you actually buy a home. Now, if you're kind of familiar with it, that's one thing. But if you have no idea, you've never been there before, you're moving to another market, take a little breather. Rent there first, and then consider the idea of buying a home once you understand the market. And another reason that a majority of homeowners had regrets during that period of time is because a lot of people were dumb and waived all of their contingencies when buying a home. Please do not waive all of your contingencies when you purchase a home. Sounds like common sense, but because of how competitive the market is out there are people out there taking advice from other people and just doing it. I will tell you, as a real estate agent for 20 years, I can maybe count on one finger how many people have waived all of their contingencies when buying a home. And that's because it's very, very dangerous to do that. Now, in some cases, you might waive the appraisal. You might waive the loan contingency because you're a solid borrower, or you're buying cash or whatever, and you don't need the appraisal. You don't need the loan. They don't factor in. But you should never, ever, ever waive the inspection contingency when it comes to buying a home. And that's because there could be problems that the homeowner is not even familiar with and needs to disclose through the process. So hire an inspector, spend the nominal amount of money that it costs to hire a professional to go through that property just to make sure you're dotting those I's and crossing those T's. I told this story a couple of weeks ago about a homeowner who lived next door to a potential client that I have. And the client was telling me the story that the homeowner that bought the home waived inspections, but he started to notice some drops in the ceiling. And so he went up into the attic of that property and realized that the previous owner had put buckets up there to catch water. And what had happened is those buckets over time had filled up all the way to the top with water and started to flow over into the ceiling. And that's when the homeowner figured out that the roof was actually bad on that property because they waived all of the contingencies to start. So if you decide to do that, you're likely going to have huge regrets when buying a home. And the last potential regret that I want to talk about in today's video is people buying with the idea that they're going to parlay the equity in that home that they're buying right now into a new property in a short period of time, say 1 to 2 years. Because home prices have gone up so much over the last couple of years and people have been able to buy a home, sell it, make money, buy the next home, sell it, make money in some cases, and even buy another home because of how crazy the market is, that set the expectation out there that that's how the real estate market works, that it just goes up and then it goes up in some parabolic format. That's not reality. In fact, the real estate market over the last couple of years is completely opposite of what the real estate market has done traditionally. On average, home prices have appreciated about 4.6% over the last 65 years, whereas over the last 3 to 4 years, we've seen home prices climb as much as 40 to 50%. Understand, that's not reality. So don't buy a home that doesn't work with your needs right now, or with the idea that, hey, I'm just going to hold on to this home for a couple of years until I make some money and then I'm going to sell it and buy the next home. Realize that might not happen, and there's a high likelihood that you're sitting in that same property in the next couple of years with little to no appreciation, because there's a high likelihood that home prices flatten compared to the last couple of years and you don't see that crazy appreciation. So realize it's not always a great time to buy a home, and if you buy a home and make the decisions that I talked about in today's video, there's a high likelihood that you're going to have regrets. Now, you might have watched this and go, Jeb, I'm not going to make any of those regrets. I'm not going to do any of those dumb things. Also understand there's a couple of types of property out there in the market that I believe you should never buy. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, do me a favor and check out this video here.